The glass shattered against the wall, echoing the shattering of my heart. It was a sound that reverberated through the room, punctuating the stunned silence that followed. Emily's eyes widened in horror as she sat frozen on the bed, sheets tangled around her legs. Mark, our neighbor whom I had trusted like a friend, scrambled to cover his exposed torso, his face a mix of guilt and panic. I couldn't speak. My mind raced, trying to comprehend the scene before me. Just moments ago, I had walked into our bedroom, exhausted from my long business trip to New York. The relief of finally being home, of seeing Emily after weeks of late-night calls and missed dinners, had fueled my steps. But that relief shattered into a million pieces as soon as I crossed the threshold and saw them together. Emily's voice broke the silence, trembling with fear and desperation. "John, too, I can explain." I didn't want to hear it. Anger surged through me, hot and consuming. Without a word, I turned and stormed out of the room, the images of their betrayal burning in my mind. The hallway blurred as tears of rage and disbelief stung my eyes. How could she? How could they? My footsteps echoed down the stairs as I descended into the living room. I paced back and forth, trying to contain the storm of emotions threatening to overwhelm me. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, each second mocking the shattered pieces of my life. Finally, I grabbed a framed photo from the mantel and hurled it across the room. It crashed against the wall, glass exploding into shards that mirrored the brokenness inside me. The pain was unbearable, a physical ache in my chest that matched the ache in my soul. Minutes passed, maybe hours, before I heard tentative footsteps on the stairs. Emily appeared in the doorway, her face pale and tear-streaked. "John, please." I cut her off with a bitter laugh, devoid of any humor. "Please what, Emily? Please forgive you? Please pretend like this never happened?" She flinched at my words, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I'm sorry. I never meant." "Save it," I spat, my voice raw with emotion. "You've made your choice." With that, I turned away from her, unable to bear the sight of her any longer. I stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind me with a force that shook the walls. The cool night air hit me like a punch to the gut, but I welcomed the pain. It grounded me, reminding me that despite the chaos inside, the world continued to turn. As I stood there in the darkness, staring up at the stars, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. This betrayal would not go unanswered. Whatever it took, whatever the cost, I would make them pay for what they had done to me. The days leading up to my business trip to New York had been a whirlwind of preparation and anticipation. It was a crucial deal, one that could potentially secure a promotion I had been eyeing for years. Emily had been supportive as always, despite the strain our hectic schedules had put on our relationship lately. We had met in college, a whirlwind romance that had swept us both off our feet. Emily was smart, beautiful, and fiercely independent, a perfect match for my driven personality. We had built a life together, navigating the ups and downs with unwavering commitment. But lately, things had started to change. My job demanded more of my time, and Emily's freelance graphic design work had taken off, filling her days with deadlines and client meetings. Our dinners together had become rare occurrences, replaced by quick phone calls and rushed conversations. The morning of my departure was no different. Emily stood by the door, a forced smile on her face, as she handed me my suitcase. "You'll knock him dead, honey," she had said, her voice tinged with pride and exhaustion. I kissed her forehead, promising to call whenever I could, and left with a heavy heart. The airport was a blur of noise and motion, but beneath the excitement of the trip, a nagging worry gnawed at me. Had we drifted too far apart? Was Emily happy? I pushed the thoughts aside, focusing instead on the meetings ahead. New York greeted me with its characteristic hustle and bustle. Days blurred into nights as I plunged into negotiations and meetings, fueled by adrenaline and ambition. The nights, however, were quieter. Alone in my hotel room, I would stare out at the city skyline, my mind drifting back to Emily. Phone calls became our lifeline, brief moments of connection amid the chaos. Emily's voice was strained, the conversation stilted as we danced around the unspoken tension between us. I knew she missed me. She had always been vocal about her feelings, but there was an edge to her words now, a distance I couldn't ignore. It was during one of these calls that Mike, my colleague, dropped the bombshell. "Hey, John," he had said casually, "I think I saw Emily at that Italian place on Elm Street yesterday." My heart skipped a beat. Emily, what was she doing there? Mike hesitated, then sighed. She was with some guy, looked pretty cozy, the world tilted on its axis. The image of Emily laughing with another man burned in my mind, a betrayal so visceral it left me reeling. I wanted to dismiss it, to believe Mike had made a mistake, but the doubt had taken root, growing with each passing second. That night, I lay awake in my hotel bed, staring at the ceiling as 1,000 questions raced through my mind. Who was he? How long had it been going on? And most importantly, why? The ache in my chest grew, a painful reminder of how fragile happiness could be. When morning came, I threw myself into my work with renewed determination. But beneath the facade of confidence, a storm brewed. The truth was out there, waiting to be uncovered. And no matter how much it hurt, I needed to know. The seed of doubt planted by Mike's casual observation grew into a gnawing suspicion that refused to be ignored. Every phone call with Emily became a battleground of hidden meanings and unspoken truths. Her responses were guarded, her laughter strained. I tried to push aside my unease, burying myself deeper in work to distract from the growing rift between us. But the image of Emily with another man haunted me, a constant reminder of my own absence and her solitude. It was a week after Mike's revelation when another colleague, Sarah, inadvertently added fuel to the fire. Over lunch, she mentioned seeing Emily and Mark, our neighbor, having coffee at a local cafe. Her words were innocent enough, but they ignited a storm of questions inside me. Mark had been our neighbor for years, a friendly face at neighborhood barbecues and weekend gatherings. He was easygoing, quick with a joke, and always willing to lend a hand. Emily had often spoken fondly of him, their conversations filled with shared interests and inside jokes. But now, every interaction between them took on a new significance. I found myself analyzing their every word, searching for hidden meanings and subtle clues. Had I been blind to the truth all this time? That evening, as I sat alone in my hotel room, I scrolled through old photos on my phone. Pictures of Emily and Mark together, smiling and laughing, mocked me from the screen. I felt a surge of anger, quickly followed by a crushing wave of sadness. I needed answers. Without fully understanding why, I called Mike and asked him to meet me for a drink. He arrived at the bar looking concerned, his brow furrowed with worry. "Hey, John, what's going on?" he asked, sliding into the booth opposite me. I hesitated, unsure of how to voice my suspicions. Finally, I took a deep breath and plunged ahead. "Mike, did you see Emily with Mark again?" Mike's expression darkened, understanding dawning in his eyes. "Yeah, I did." "Look, John, I'm sorry if I've overstepped." "No," I interrupted, my voice tight with emotion. "I need to know the truth. How long have you noticed them together?" Mike hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "A few weeks, maybe? It's hard to say exactly. They've been meeting up during the day when you're at work." The weight of his words settled on my shoulders like a heavy burden. Weeks. They had been seeing each other for weeks, right under my nose. The betrayal cut deep, a sharp pain that threatened to consume me. I thanked Mike for his honesty and left the bar in a daze. The city streets blurred as I walked, my mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. How could Emily do this to me? And Mark, was he aware of the damage he had caused? When I returned to my hotel room, I stared out at the city skyline, feeling utterly alone. The truth was out there now, undeniable and cruel. The woman I loved, the woman I had built a life with, had betrayed me in the most devastating way possible. Anger simmered beneath the surface, mingling with the pain and sorrow. But amidst the turmoil, a cold resolve took hold. I couldn't confront Emily from thousands of miles away, but I knew one thing for certain. I would not let this betrayal go unanswered. The days that followed were a haze of restless nights and tense phone calls. Each conversation with Emily felt like walking on thin ice, our words carefully measured and weighted with unspoken accusations. I tried to cling to the remnants of our relationship, hoping against hope that Mike had been mistaken, that Sarah had misunderstood. but the truth refused to be ignored. Emily's evasiveness spoke volumes, her reluctance to meet my eyes over video calls only confirming my worst fears. The distance between us grew, a silent barrier that neither of us knew how to breach. It was a Friday evening when I finally summoned the courage to confront Emily. The clock on my hotel room wall ticked loudly, each second stretching into an eternity as I dialed her number. The phone rang once, twice, before she picked up. "John?" Her voice was hesitant, tinged with apprehension. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what I needed to say. "Emily, we need to talk." There was a pregnant pause on the line, the silence heavy with unspoken words. "About what?" Her voice was carefully neutral, but I heard the underlying tension. I hesitated, unsure of how to broach the subject without causing further damage. I've heard things, Emily. Seen things." She was silent for a moment, and when she spoke again, her voice wavered. "What are you talking about, John?" I closed my eyes, trying to gather my thoughts. "Mike saw you with Mark at the cafe. Sarah mentioned it too." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. "John, Her voice faltered, and I imagined her searching for the right words. "Don," I cut in, the bitterness in my tone surprising even myself. "Just tell me the truth, Emily. Are you seeing him?" Her denial was swift, almost too swift. "No, John, I swear. Mark and I are just friends. We were catching up, that's all." The words should have reassured me, but they only fueled the fire of suspicion burning inside me. "Friends don't meet in secret, Emily. They don't hide things from their spouses." She sighed, the sound heavy with resignation. "I'm sorry, John. I didn't mean for this to happen." The admission hung between us like a weight, the air thick with unresolved tension. I struggled to find the right response, torn between anger and heartbreak. "I don't know what to believe anymore, Emily." Tears welled up in her voice. "Please, John, don't give up on us. We can work through this." But the chasm between us felt insurmountable. "I need some time," I finally managed to say, my voice cracking with emotion. "I'll be home soon." The line went silent, the absence of her voice echoing in my ears. I hung up the phone, the weight of her words settling heavily on my shoulders. How had everything unraveled so quickly? And more importantly, where did we go from here? I returned home earlier than planned, my mind a battlefield of conflicting emotions. The flight back had been long and turbulent, mirroring the turmoil inside me. Emily had insisted on picking me up from the airport, but I had declined, needing time to sort through my thoughts. The house felt different as I walked through the door, a strange tension hanging in the air. Emily greeted me with a forced smile, her eyes filled with apprehension. I could see the guilt written across her face, the weight of her betrayal heavy on her shoulders. For the first few days, we tiptoed around each other, our interactions stilted and awkward. I tried to bury myself in work, catching up on missed projects and deadlines, but the truth hovered over us like a dark cloud. It was on a rainy Tuesday evening that everything finally came to a head. I had come home early from work, my mind restless and my heart heavy. As I climbed the stairs to our bedroom, I heard muffled voices coming from behind the closed door. My steps faltered, a sinking feeling settling in the pit of my stomach. I pushed open the door without knocking, the sight before me burning into my memory like a branding iron. Emily and Mark were tangled together on our bed, their clothes hastily discarded. The room spun around me as I stood there, frozen in shock and disbelief. The sound of my own heartbeat filled my ears, drowning out their frantic whispers. Emily's eyes widened in horror as she scrambled to cover herself, while Mark's expression shifted from surprise to guilt. Anger surged through me, hot and consuming, threatening to engulf everything in its path. "How could you?" The words escaped my lips in a choked whisper, the pain in my chest threatening to suffocate me. Emily's voice cracked as she struggled to find an explanation. "John, I'm sorry," too, but her words fell on deaf ears. I turned and fled the room, the images of their betrayal burning behind my eyelids. Down the stairs, through the living room, and out into the rain-soaked night. I walked for hours, the cold rain soaking through my clothes, but I barely felt it. My mind was a whirlwind of emotions: anger, betrayal, heartbreak. How could she have done this to me? How could I have been so blind? When I finally returned home, hours later, Emily was waiting for me in the living room. Her eyes were red-rimmed with tears, her face a mask of anguish. "John, please," she begged, reaching out to touch my arm. I jerked away from her touch, unable to bear the sight of her. "Don," I said hoarsely, my voice raw with emotion. "Just Don." Silence hung between us like a heavy curtain, suffocating and final. The truth was out in the open now, a wound that could never fully heal. And as I stood there, staring at the woman I had loved and trusted with all my heart, I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. Days turned into weeks as the aftermath of Emily's betrayal unfolded like a slow-motion disaster. The house, once filled with warmth and laughter, now echoed with the hollow emptiness of broken promises and shattered trust. Emily had retreated into herself, her attempts at reconciliation met with a wall of icy silence from me. I couldn't bear to look at her without feeling a surge of anger and hurt. Yet, despite my resolve to keep my distance, fate had other plans in store. It was a mundane Thursday evening when Emily approached me tentatively in the kitchen. Her eyes were downcast, her hands fidgeting nervously at her sides. "John, there's something I need to tell you," she began hesitantly. I glanced up from the newspaper I was pretending to read, my jaw tightening involuntarily. "What is it, Emily?" My voice was cold, a sharp contrast to the warmth that used to color our conversations. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for what she knew would be an explosive revelation. I'm pregnant." The words hit me like a physical blow, knocking the air out of my lungs. Pregnant. The realization washed over me in waves, mingling disbelief with a sickening sense of inevitability. I stared at her, speechless, my mind racing. 1,000 questions clamored for attention, but one rose above the rest. Whose child was it? Mark's or mine? Emily must have seen the turmoil in my eyes because she rushed to explain, her voice trembling. "John, I don't know whose it is. It could be yours, or it could be Mark's." I didn't plan for this to happen. Her words fell on deaf ears as rage boiled inside me. How could she expect me to believe anything she said now? The trust that had once been the foundation of our marriage lay shattered at our feet, irreparable. I turned away from her, unable to bear the sight of her pleading expression. "Get out," I said hoarsely, my voice barely above a whisper. "John, please." Emily reached out to touch my arm, but I jerked away from her touch as if burned. "Get out," I repeated, my voice rising in anger. "I need time to think." She nodded silently, tears streaming down her cheeks, and fled from the kitchen. The sound of the front door closing echoed through the empty house, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the wreckage of our marriage. Pregnant. The word reverberated through my mind, a stark reminder of the tangled mess we had become. Whatever happened next, one thing was certain: our lives would never be the same again. The days that followed Emily's revelation were a blur of emotional turmoil and relentless introspection. The house felt suffocating, each room a reminder of the life we had built together, a life now shattered beyond repair. I spent sleepless nights staring at the ceiling, grappling with the enormity of the betrayal and the uncertainty of Emily's pregnancy. The images of her with Mark haunted me, tormenting my dreams and waking hours alike. How could she have done this to us? To our marriage? Memories of our happier times taunted me, the laughter and love we had shared now twisted into bitter reminders of what was lost. I found myself retracing every moment, searching for signs I had missed, clues that might explain how we had ended up here. The photos on the mantel mocked me, snapshots of a life that no longer existed. Our wedding day, vacations together, birthdays celebrated with friends, all tainted by the knowledge of Emily's infidelity. The woman I had trusted with my heart had betrayed me in the cruelest way possible. Yet amid the anger and hurt, a part of me still longed for the woman I had loved. Emily's tearful apologies and pleas for forgiveness echoed in my mind, her pain mirroring my own. Could I forgive her? Could our marriage survive this? I tried to bury myself in work, throwing myself into projects and meetings with a fervor that bordered on obsession. But no matter how busy I kept myself, Emily's presence, or absence, haunted every corner of my mind. The weeks stretched into months, the tension between us palpable yet unspoken. We moved through the motions of daily life, exchanging polite words and strained smiles, but the gulf between us seemed insurmountable. How could we bridge the divide when trust had been shattered so completely? Friends and family reached out, offering words of comfort and support, but their well-meaning gestures felt like empty platitudes. Only those who had walked the path of betrayal could understand the depth of my pain, the ache of a heart torn between love and betrayal. And through it all, Emily's pregnancy loomed like a specter, a constant reminder of the tangled mess we had become. Would I be able to accept a child born of such betrayal? Could I find it in myself to be a father to a child whose paternity was uncertain? These questions haunted me day and night, driving me to the brink of despair. The emotional turmoil threatened to consume me, leaving me adrift in a sea of conflicting emotions and unanswered questions. As I struggled to find solid ground, one thing became painfully clear: the road ahead would be long and fraught with heartache, no matter which path I chose to take. As weeks turned into months, a cold resolve settled over me like a thick fog. The initial storm of emotions, anger, hurt, betrayal, had morphed into a steely determination. I couldn't erase the images of Emily and Mark together, nor the pain of her betrayal, but I could control how I responded to it. Late nights became my refuge as I meticulously planned my revenge. The darkness outside mirrored the darkness within me, feeding the simmering rage that fueled my every move. I scoured through emails and messages, piecing together a timeline of Emily and Mark's affair, tracing their secret meetings and shared moments. I enlisted the help of a private investigator, discreetly gathering evidence that would irrefutably expose their deception. Phone records, surveillance photos, every piece of information was a weapon in my arsenal, a means to exact justice for the shattered pieces of my heart. But my revenge went beyond mere exposure. It was about dismantling their carefully constructed facade, about inflicting the same pain they had inflicted on me. I planted seeds of doubt in Mark's professional life, anonymously tipping off his employer about unethical practices and damaging his reputation beyond repair. Emily, too, faced the consequences of her actions. I meticulously orchestrated scenarios that would expose her lies to friends and family, leaving her isolated and vulnerable. Her freelance clients received anonymous emails detailing her affair, tarnishing her professional reputation, and leaving her struggling to salvage what remained. The more I plotted, the more powerful I felt. Each calculated move brought me closer to a twisted sense of justice, a vindication of the betrayal that had shattered my world. Yet beneath the veneer of revenge, a part of me questioned the morality of my actions. Was this truly justice, or was I sinking to their level? In quieter moments, guilt gnawed at me, an unwelcome guest that refused to be ignored. The lines between right and wrong blurred, the boundaries of my own integrity bending under the weight of my rage. But each time doubt crept in, I pushed it aside, drowning it in a sea of justified anger and righteous indignation. Friends and family noticed the change in me, the hardness in my eyes and the coldness in my voice. Their concern was palpable, their attempts at intervention met with dismissive silence. They couldn't understand the depth of my pain, the rawness of betrayal that had driven me to this point. And as I stood on the precipice of my revenge, staring into the abyss of my own making, I knew there would be no turning back. The path I had chosen was dark and treacherous, but it was a path I walked willingly, driven by a thirst for retribution that consumed me from within. The night was cool and still as I stood outside Mark's house, hidden in the shadows of the neighboring trees. I had spent weeks tracking his movements, learning his routines, and now the time had come to set my plan in motion. Mark had become my primary target, the man who had betrayed not only our friendship but also the sanctity of my marriage. Anger burned hot in my veins as I watched him through the window, oblivious to the storm that was about to descend upon him. With a deep breath, I approached his driveway, my footsteps silent on the pavement. The adrenaline surged through me, a potent mix of anticipation and vindication. I reached into my pocket and withdrew a can of red spray paint, the first tool in my arsenal of revenge. Moving swiftly, I defaced Mark's car with bold, accusing words. Cheater and home wrecker sprawled across the windshield and doors. Each stroke of the paint felt like a cathartic release, a tangible manifestation of the betrayal that had torn my world apart. Satisfied with my handiwork, I slipped away into the night, leaving behind a trail of destruction that would haunt Mark long after the paint dried. It was a small act of revenge, but it was only the beginning. In the days that followed, the news of Mark's vandalized car spread like wildfire through our neighborhood. Whispers and speculation followed him wherever he went, his reputation tarnished beyond repair. I watched with grim satisfaction as the consequences of his actions unfolded before my eyes. But even as I reveled in the chaos I had unleashed, a part of me questioned the cost of my revenge. Guilt nagged at the edges of my conscience, a constant reminder of the moral line I had crossed. Was this truly justice, or had I become the monster I despised? Emily's reaction to my revenge was a mix of fear and confusion. She pleaded with me to stop, to find a way to move forward without destroying ourselves in the process. But her words fell on deaf ears as my obsession with retribution grew stronger. The rift between us widened, a gaping chasm that threatened to swallow whatever remained of our marriage. Emily retreated further into herself, her attempts at reconciliation met with bitter resentment from me. The love that had once bound us together had become a distant memory, replaced by the bitterness of betrayal and the poison of revenge. And as I stood in the wreckage of my own making, I knew that the path I had chosen was leading me down a dark and dangerous road. The line between victim and perpetrator blurred, leaving me adrift in a sea of moral ambiguity and self-destruction. But despite the turmoil raging inside me, I couldn't stop. The thirst for revenge consumed me, driving me onward with a relentless determination that bordered on madness. And with each act of retribution, I plunged deeper into the abyss, uncertain if I would ever find my way back. The taste of revenge was bitter on my tongue, yet it fueled a relentless drive within me. As the weeks passed, my actions escalated, each move calculated to inflict maximum damage on those who had betrayed me. Mark's vandalized car had been just the beginning. Now, I delved deeper into his personal and professional life, leaving a trail of breadcrumbs that would unravel the facade he had so carefully constructed. I anonymously sent incriminating emails to his colleagues and superiors, accusing him of misconduct and incompetence. I orchestrated encounters with disgruntled clients who had supposedly been cheated by him, planting seeds of doubt and distrust that would grow into a tangled web of consequences. In Emily's world, too, my vengeance took on new forms. I leaked carefully curated snippets of her affair to mutual friends and acquaintances, ensuring that the truth would spread like wildfire through our social circles. The whispers and sideways glances she received were a testament to the crumbling foundation of her once respected reputation. But amidst the chaos I had wrought, a part of me recoiled at the devastation I was causing. Guilt gnawed at my conscience, a relentless reminder of the collateral damage left in my wake. Friends who had once stood by our side now looked upon us with pity and judgment, their sympathy overshadowed by the spectacle of our unraveling lives. Emily's tears and pleading fell on deaf ears as I descended further into the abyss of my own making. The lines between justice and revenge blurred, leaving me drowning in a sea of bitterness and regret. Yet, the thirst for retribution drove me onward, a relentless force that refused to be quenched. In quieter moments when the weight of my actions threatened to crush me, I found myself questioning the path I had chosen. Was this truly justice, or had I become the very thing I despised? Had my obsession with revenge clouded my judgment, leaving me adrift in a world of darkness? But each time doubt threatened to consume me, I pushed it aside, burying it beneath the justified anger and wounded pride that fueled my every move. The wounds of betrayal ran deep, a constant ache in my heart that drove me to seek solace in the destruction of those who had wronged me. And as I stood on the precipice of my own undoing, I knew that the road ahead would be fraught with danger and regret. The lines between victim and perpetrator had blurred beyond recognition, leaving me adrift in a moral quagmire from which there seemed to be no escape. Yet, amidst the turmoil and self-inflicted chaos, a small voice whispered in the depths of my soul, a voice that spoke of forgiveness and redemption. Could I find it in myself to forgive Emily, to let go of the rage that consumed me? Or was I doomed to be swallowed whole by the darkness that had taken root within me? The answers eluded me as I plunged deeper into the abyss, my thirst for revenge eclipsing all else. And as the world around me crumbled, I knew that the consequences of my actions would haunt me long after the last vestiges of my shattered life had faded into obscurity. The relentless pursuit of revenge had consumed me completely, leaving little room for anything else. Days blurred into nights as I continued to orchestrate chaos in the lives of those who had betrayed me. Emily's tear-streaked face haunted my dreams, a constant reminder of the woman I had loved and the devastation I had wrought. But beneath the facade of righteous anger, a seed of doubt had taken root, a nagging voice that whispered of regret and remorse. Was this truly the path I wanted to walk? Had my thirst for vengeance blinded me to the possibility of forgiveness and healing? One fateful evening, as I sat alone in the dimly lit living room, the weight of my actions pressed down on me like a suffocating blanket. The silence was deafening, broken only by the occasional creak of the floorboards beneath my restless pacing. A knock on the door shattered the stillness, startling me from my reverie. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the doorknob, before finally pulling it open. Standing on the doorstep was Emily, her eyes red-rimmed from crying, her face a mask of sorrow and desperation. "John," she began, her voice trembling with emotion, "please, we need to talk." I regarded her silently for a moment, the bitterness and anger warring with the flicker of love that still burned within me. Against my better judgment, I stepped aside, allowing her to enter. She crossed the threshold hesitantly, as if unsure of her welcome. We stood facing each other in the dim light, the tension thick between us like a physical barrier. "John, I'm so sorry," Emily whispered, her voice barely above a whisper. "I never meant for any of this to happen. Please believe me." Her words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of everything left unsaid between us. I struggled to find my voice, to articulate the storm of emotions raging inside me. "Why, Emily?" I finally managed to choke out, the words raw with pain. "Why did you do it?" Tears streamed down her cheeks, her shoulders shaking with the weight of her guilt. John. You were always so focused on work, on your career." I felt neglected, unimportant. Her words pierced me like a knife, exposing the cracks in our marriage that had remained hidden for too long. Guilt mingled with my anger, a tumultuous mix of emotions that threatened to overwhelm me. "But that doesn't excuse what you did," I said hoarsely, struggling to keep my voice steady. "You betrayed me, Emily. You shattered everything we had built together." She nodded, her gaze pleading. "I know, and I'm sorry. I regret it every single day. Please, John, can't we find a way to move forward, to rebuild what we once had?" I hesitated, torn between the desire to forgive and the fear of further pain. The wounds of betrayal ran deep, their scars etched into my soul. Could I find it in myself to trust her again, to let go of the bitterness that had consumed me? Before I could respond, Emily spoke again, her voice cracking with emotion. "And there's something else, John. I think I'm pregnant." The words hit me like a thunderbolt, my mind reeling with the implications. A child, a tangible reminder of the tangled mess we had become. The uncertainty of paternity hung between us like a heavy fog, threatening to suffocate whatever remained of our fractured relationship. Silence stretched between us, fraught with unspoken questions and fears. I stared into Emily's tear-filled eyes, searching for answers in the depths of her pain. And as I stood on the precipice of a decision that would shape the rest of my life, I knew that the road ahead would be fraught with challenges and heartache. The wounds of betrayal may never fully heal, but perhaps, just perhaps, there was still a glimmer of hope for forgiveness and redemption. The revelation of Emily's possible pregnancy hung heavy in the air between us, casting a shadow over the fragile peace that had momentarily settled in our fractured relationship. Days passed in a haze of uncertainty and tension, each moment fraught with unspoken fears and unanswered questions. I wrestled with conflicting emotions, anger, betrayal, and a flicker of hope buried deep beneath layers of pain. The specter of revenge still loomed large in my mind, a dark force that threatened to consume everything in its path. One evening, as I sat alone in the study, the weight of my turmoil became unbearable. The walls closed in around me, suffocating me with their silent judgment. I couldn't escape the memories of Emily's betrayal, nor the relentless pursuit of vengeance that had driven me to the brink of madness. A sudden noise jolted me from my thoughts, a muted conversation drifting through the air from the adjacent room. Emily's voice, tinged with urgency, mingled with another, a voice I recognized all too well. Mark. My heart raced as I listened, the words indistinct but the implications clear. They were meeting again behind my back, as if the devastation they had already wrought upon me wasn't enough. Blind rage surged through me, a torrential wave that drowned out reason and restraint. I stormed into the living room, where Emily and Mark stood frozen in shock at my sudden appearance. "What the hell is going on?" I bellowed, my voice echoing off the walls with raw intensity. Emily's eyes widened in fear, her hands trembling at her sides. "John, please," she began, but I cut her off with a violent gesture. "Don, just Don," I spat, my voice thick with rage. "After everything, you're still seeing him? How could you do this to me?" Mark stepped forward, his face a mask of guilt and defiance. "Look, John, I'm sorry." "Sorry?" I laughed, bitterly, the sound harsh in the tense silence that followed. "You're sorry? That's supposed to make everything okay?" Emily reached out to touch my arm, her voice pleading. "John, please, let's talk about this." But I shook off her touch, the betrayal burning like a firestorm inside me. "No, Emily, there's nothing left to talk about." In a blind fury I lashed out, my fists connecting with Mark's jaw with a sickening thud. He staggered back, blood trickling from split lips, but I didn't stop. Every ounce of pain and rage I had buried inside me erupted in a torrent of violence, a primal scream of anguish and betrayal. Emily screamed, her voice a desperate plea for me to stop, but I couldn't hear her over the roar of my own fury. I rained blows upon Mark, each strike a cathartic release of pent-up emotion. The room spun around me in a blur of chaos, furniture crashing to the floor as the violence escalated. It was only when I felt strong hands pulling me away that I finally stopped, panting for breath, my knuckles bruised and bloody. Mark lay crumpled on the floor, dazed and disoriented, while Emily stood frozen in horror, tears streaming down her face. "What have you done?" she whispered, her voice trembling with disbelief. The reality of my actions crashed down upon me like a tidal wave. What had I done? In my quest for vengeance, I had become the very monster I despised. The violence, the pain, I had crossed a line from which there was no return. But as I stood there, surrounded by the wreckage of my own making, I knew that the consequences of my actions would haunt me forever. The cycle of betrayal and revenge had spiraled out of control, leaving behind a trail of devastation that could never be undone. And as I gazed into Emily's tear-streaked eyes, I saw the shattered remnants of the life we had once shared. The love, the trust, the hope, all shattered beyond repair. The aftermath of the violent altercation with Mark left a lingering pall over our lives. Police sirens wailed in the distance as I stood amidst the wreckage of our living room, my hands trembling with a mixture of adrenaline and regret. Emily hovered nearby, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and disbelief. As the authorities arrived, they swiftly took control of the situation. Mark was treated for his injuries while I was placed under arrest, my hands cuffed behind my back. Emily's tearful protests fell on deaf ears as I was led away, the weight of my actions settling heavily upon me. The next hours passed in a blur of police station lights and questioning. I was charged with assault and battery, the gravity of the charges echoing through the sterile walls of the interrogation room. My lawyer advised me to remain silent, but guilt gnawed at my conscience like a relentless predator. Outside the confines of the station, The news of my arrest spread like wildfire through our community. Friends and neighbors whispered behind closed doors, their judgmental gazes a sharp contrast to the sympathy they had once offered. My reputation, already tarnished by the scandal of Emily's affair, plummeted to new depths. Legal proceedings loomed ominously on the horizon, casting a long shadow over our fractured lives. Emily stood by me, her loyalty a fragile lifeline in the storm of public scrutiny and personal turmoil. But the rift between us had widened beyond repair, the trust shattered irreparably by my violent outburst. As I awaited trial, remorse weighed heavily upon me. The consequences of my actions stretched far beyond the physical altercation with Mark. They had irreversibly altered the course of our lives. I struggled to reconcile the man I had become with the values I had once held dear, haunted by the realization that my thirst for revenge had cost me everything. Emily, too, faced her own battles in the wake of my arrest. Her professional reputation lay in ruins, her clients and colleagues distancing themselves from the scandal that had enveloped our lives. The pregnancy remained a looming question mark, its uncertain paternity a bitter reminder of our shattered dreams. Through it all, the legal system moved forward with relentless efficiency. Court dates were set, evidence was presented, and witnesses testified to the tumultuous events that had unfolded in our once happy home. My lawyer argued for leniency, citing the emotional turmoil and provocation that had led to my violent outburst. But as the trial drew to a close, the verdict loomed like a specter over my future. Guilt and shame weighed heavily upon me as I faced the consequences of my actions, consequences that would reshape the course of my life and forever alter the relationships that had once defined me. And as I stood before the judge, awaiting the final judgment that would seal my fate, I knew that the road ahead would be fraught with challenges and heartache. The legal consequences of my violent revenge had shattered more than just bones. They had shattered the very fabric of my existence, leaving behind a landscape scarred by regret and remorse. The gavel fell with a resounding thud, echoing through the courtroom like a final verdict on the wreckage of our lives. Guilty of assault and battery, a judgment that reverberated with the weight of my actions and the consequences that followed. I stood silently as the sentence was pronounced, the words washing over me like a cold wave. Months of legal proceedings culminated in a prison sentence, an outcome that left me numb with shock and remorse. Emily sat in the gallery, her face a mask of anguish and resignation. The courtroom emptied slowly, leaving behind a silence that mirrored the emptiness in my soul. Emily approached me tentatively, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. "I'm so sorry, John," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "I never wanted this." I stared at her, the bitterness and anger of the past months tempered by the harsh reality of our situation. "Neither did I replied quietly, my voice raw with regret. The days that followed were a blur of packing and goodbyes, painful farewells to a life that had once held promise and hope. Emily stood by me, her support a fragile thread that bound us together amidst the wreckage of our marriage. Visiting hours at the prison became the routine of our fractured existence. Emily's visits were a lifeline in the darkness, a reminder of the love and loss that defined our shared history. But the chasm between us had widened beyond repair, the trust shattered by betrayal and violence. As the weeks turned into months, I grappled with the harsh reality of life behind bars. The stark confines of the cell mirrored the confines of my own guilt and remorse, a prison within a prison that held me captive in its suffocating embrace. Outside, Emily struggled to rebuild her life in the aftermath of our tumultuous downfall. The pregnancy remained a constant reminder of our tangled past, its uncertain paternity a painful testament to the shattered dreams that had once defined us. Friends and family offered their support from a distance, their pity and judgment a bitter reminder of the scandal that had torn through our community. The aftermath of my violent revenge had left a trail of destruction in its wake, a legacy of pain and regret that stretched far beyond the confines of our fractured home. But amidst the wreckage, a faint glimmer of hope flickered in the darkness. Emily's visits brought moments of solace and reconciliation, a fragile bridge spanning the chasm of our broken trust. And as I navigated the harsh realities of life behind bars, I began to confront the demons that had driven me to the brink of madness. Guilt and remorse weighed heavily upon me, a constant companion in the lonely confines of my cell. Yet, amidst the darkness, a seed of redemption began to take root. I attended counseling sessions, grappling with the anger and bitterness that had consumed me. The road to forgiveness, both for Emily and for myself, was long and arduous, but perhaps, just perhaps, there was still a chance for redemption amidst the ruins of our shattered lives. As I faced the uncertain future that lay ahead, one thing became painfully clear. The consequences of my actions had irrevocably changed the course of our lives. The road to healing would be fraught with challenges and heartache, but perhaps in the ashes of our brokenness, there was still a chance for reconciliation and renewal. The passage of time within the confines of prison walls felt both stagnant and relentless. Each day blurred into the next, marked by routine and monotony, a stark contrast to the tumultuous whirlwind that had brought me here. Emily's visits became my lifeline, brief respites from the harsh reality of my incarceration. Her presence offered fleeting moments of solace and regret, a reminder of the love and loss that had defined our shattered marriage. But the gulf between us remained vast and unbridgeable, the trust irreparably shattered by the betrayal and violence that had torn through our lives. Our conversations were stilted and strained, weighted down by the weight of unsaid words and unhealed wounds. The pregnancy had progressed, its impending arrival a poignant reminder of the tangled mess we had become. Emily navigated the challenges of impending motherhood alone, her once bright future clouded by uncertainty and regret. Outside the prison walls, life moved forward in a relentless march. Friends and acquaintances whispered behind closed doors, their judgment and sympathy in equal measure. The scandal of my violent revenge had left a permanent stain on our once respected reputation. Legal appeals and discussions of early release offered brief flickers of hope amidst the darkness. But the specter of my actions continued to cast a long shadow over our fractured lives. The consequences of my choices had irreversibly altered the trajectory of our future, leaving us adrift in a sea of regret and remorse. As the days turned into weeks and months, I grappled with the harsh reality of my incarceration. The prison walls held me captive, but it was the weight of my own guilt and shame that bound me in their suffocating embrace. Emily's visits became less frequent over time, the distance between us widening with each passing day. Her eyes held a sadness I couldn't bear to see, a silent acknowledgement of the shattered dreams and broken promises that lay scattered in the wake of my violent revenge. And as I faced the uncertain future that lay ahead, one thing became painfully clear. The road to redemption was long and arduous, paved with the shards of a life irreparably fractured. The scars of betrayal and violence ran deep, leaving behind a legacy of pain and regret that no amount of remorse could erase. In the quiet moments of solitude, I began to confront the demons that had driven me to the brink of madness. Counseling sessions offered a fragile glimpse into the darkness of my own soul, a journey toward forgiveness and healing that stretched far beyond the prison walls. But amidst the wreckage of our shattered lives, a faint glimmer of hope persisted. Emily's resilience and strength in the face of adversity inspired me, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, even in the face of betrayal and heartache. As I navigated the harsh realities of life behind bars, I began to rebuild myself from the ashes of my own destruction. The road to redemption was fraught with challenges and setbacks, but perhaps in the quiet moments of reflection and remorse, there was still a chance for reconciliation and renewal. And as I faced the uncertain future that lay ahead, one thing became painfully clear. The consequences of my actions had irrevocably changed the course of our lives. The road to healing would be fraught with challenges and heartache, but perhaps, in the ashes of our brokenness, there was still a chance for redemption and the possibility of a new beginning. But for now, I remained confined within the prison walls, a captive of my own making, a stark reminder of the cost of vengeance and the fragile nature of forgiveness. And as I looked toward the horizon, uncertain of what lay beyond, I held on to the faint hope that someday, somehow, we might find a way to heal the wounds that had torn us apart.